So leveling up is a way for your characters to develop mechanically, to gain spells and skills and abilities within the context of the rules of the game. But sometimes we need to develop as people in order to achieve our goals. And some of the most memorable stories in really in human history involve protagonists whose personality and beliefs and their virtues need to develop and come out and change over time. So in this video, I'm going to show you how what's sometimes been called the character arc or the hero's journey, what I call the transformational arc, can help you to tell memorable stories using unforgettable characters. The secret to setting up a transformational arc for your character throughout their campaign comes down to 6 questions that are easy to answer. Now, first of all, I need to say that everyone plays D&D differently. This isn't going to be for everyone. If you want to hack and slash and play the game that way, that's totally fine. This is kind of a deeper cut, and it's interesting, and I've found it incredibly powerful, even profound, but you're going to have to see what you think for yourself, obviously. So the 6 questions, again, are pretty straightforward. The first one is, what is some goal that your character can't achieve right now in their current circumstances? What's one thing that they can't really do starting out as a level 1 character, they're not really able to accomplish? And then you want to look at what is one shortcoming, what's one character flaw they might need to overcome in themselves in order to achieve this. So not just gaining more hit points, not just leveling up, but what's something that could be holding them back as a person from achieving something that they want to achieve. So I'll pause here and say that the flaws and bonds and all of that you set up in your character sheet at the beginning, I often see as kind of best laid intentions and a great starting point. But the reality I've found is, and you may have found this too in your games, what happens at the table is far and away the most memorable and the most interesting. It's the stuff we talk about. It's the stuff that really gets us going. So bringing in the backstory is great, but really making that a living thing, right? So that the flaw isn't just that was back there and we keep harping on about it because it was off camera, right? It was out of scene. It was before the game even started. Instead, bringing those things in, demonstrating those flaws, demonstrating how this character is imperfect, in the early games and the early sessions is much more powerful. So what's one flaw? What's one shortcoming that they have that's going to be showing up in the game, right? Maybe they're timid, maybe they're arrogant, maybe they don't get along well with others and need to learn teamwork. Whatever it is, it needs to come in a way that's palatable too for the rest of the group, right? Just kind of being a jerk, isn't necessarily a flaw, and it's great to talk about it up front too. So just make it really clear, put it all out on the table. Hey, my character is going to be behaving a bit this way throughout the campaign, but the intention is that they're going to actually grow as a person and potentially learn something. So next you want to also look, in addition to flaws, what's one ability or one trait or one virtue they might need to develop in order to achieve this goal that they have, right? And again, we're always doing this in relation to a goal because that, makes it tangible and makes it meaningful. And there's a reason, a motivation for the character to need to develop. Then optional bonus points, really deep question, really interesting question, I think, is what's one way in which this shortcoming or this flaw could actually be transformed into a virtue or an asset for them to achieve their goal? What's one way in which this thing that looked like, a character trait that was holding them back could actually help them succeed? Next, how will we know? How will we know in the story that the character's transformed? How are they going to be different? What's going to be happening? What's it going to look like for them to have undergone this journey of personal transformation in some way? And finally, what's going to happen out in the story, right? Out in the world? How will we know that they've achieved their outer goal and that it's been linked to them developing as a person? What'll happen in the game world that'll make this be true? Probably the easiest way to show all this, and by the way, I'll put all the questions down in the description so you have them and can use them with your own characters or your own groups. But probably the easiest way is to give an example from what is the most iconic and character arcs, probably, I think, of all time, and one of the most influential pieces of literature on Dungeons and Dragons, and that is, of course, Frodo Baggins from The Hobbit.
I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way.
So what's one meaningful, significant goal that Frodo just seems like there's no way he could accomplish as a little comfort-loving hobbit, back in the Shire? Well, it's to destroy the One Ring, right? Just doesn't seem possible. The smallest of beings, in this world, to take the ring to Mordor. So what's one shortcoming, one or more character flaw that he has that he might need to overcome? Well, he's got this love of comfort. And as much as, yes, he does have an adventurous spirit, he does love hearing Bilbo's tales, he himself has a bit of a fear of the unknown. Right? He's a simple hobbit. So what's one ability that Frodo needs to develop in order to achieve this goal? Well, he needs to develop and demonstrate courage and the spirit of going on an adventure, of being willing to undertake a heroic quest, even though it's not something he would have chosen for himself. So what's one way in which this flaw or this shortcoming could be transformed for him into a virtue or an asset toward actually taking the ring to Mordor? This, I think, is the genius of Tolkien in this tale. Because what it is that Frodo's love of comfort, his love of the Shire, becomes that source of courage and wanting to save the Shire from destruction, and in realizing that all of Middle Earth is his Shire, that everything is under threat, everything he holds dear is in danger, and that he is the one, through his courage and his willingness to go on this quest, who can make a difference here. So how will we know that Frodo's transformed? What is that moment where we realize Frodo has really become the person who can actually fulfill the quest, a different person than the one who was starting out, in the Shire, in his little hobbit hole? It's the moment he steps forward to take the ring to Mordor. And I still get chills at that moment where he says, "I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way." He's admitting in that moment his frailty, his shortcomings, his simplicity, his naivete about the world around him. But he's also saying, I have courage, I have the willingness. And of course, it is in that moment that the fellowship is formed, because that courage inspires others to step forward with him, who do have the skills and abilities to help him along his way. So how do we know in the story, in the world, that this has been achieved? It's obviously the ring has been destroyed. But again, Frodo, being kind of the chosen one to take the ring to Mordor, there's no way that initial little hobbit could have necessarily done that had he not learned to overcome his love of comforts, his fear of the unknown, had he not developed his inner courage, his willingness to go on a heroic quest. And again, that wonderful moment is that it hinges it on that flaw, if you like, that fundamental thing in him of loving his Shire becomes the thing that causes him to be willing to leave it and willing to go into the heart of evil itself to save it. It's a story that we'll never forget. It's up there with the epic tales of old. And so again, this isn't for everyone. It is kind of deep stuff, but it is worth considering, and definitely consider it in context, right? Talk to your DM about, what's the bigger goal that we're all going on? Is it a save the world kind of mission that we're ultimately going to get to here? And if so, start thinking about how the flaws you set up early on with your character. And by the way, they don't have to start out at level 1, right? You can start now with thinking about some of the flaws your character might have and developing those and working with the group on telling that story. It's never too late to have a transformational arc in the course of your campaign. But think about that. Think about how that could be transformed and how interesting that could be. Because some of the most wonderful characters throughout literature, they end up as almost a different character than the person they began at. If the seeds were there for them to transform into the hero they needed to be by the end of it. So if you want to tell truly epic stories, you need truly epic characters. And ironically, truly epic characters are also flawed characters we can relate to, characters who at the beginning we find it hard to see how they would ever be able to achieve the goals they have or the goals that have been thrust upon them. So if you want to tell these kind of tales, have a look at the 6 questions, talk to your DM, talk to your fellow players, and see if you might want to set up a transformational arc.